humility is one of the most important qualities which you must have. Because if you are humble, if you make people realize that you are no threat to them, then people will embrace you.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Vanessa Judelman is the president of Mosaic People Development. For over 20 years, Vanessa has been helping clients to develop leaders who inspire great results. She is a speaker, facilitator, leadership consultant, and certified executive coach, and she's authored a book about leadership titled Mastering Leadership: What It Takes to Lead in Today's Fast-Paced World. Vanessa has had the privilege of developing leaders in large organizations like Campbells Soup, the United Nations, HelloFresh, SickKids, and the Bank of Montreal, among others. I'm really happy that she's here and agreed to share insights with us today. Vanessa, welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mike. Great to be here.
Oh, yeah, I've been looking forward to this. We made this a while ago, this appointment and all that. So I've looked you up. I've listened to some of your previous podcasts. You obviously are of the leadership world. I can't wait to hear it. But I always start with this. You know, the intro was very, very brief. And you've got a rich background, I believe, personally, and I know professionally. So what more do we need to know about Vanessa?
So, Mike, I've been developing leaders for most of my career. I live in Toronto, Canada. I went to university in Montreal called McGill University, which I did a degree in English. And my mother said to me, "What are you going to do with an English degree?" And she was a teacher, so she said, "Just, go be a teacher." So I did a degree in education, and I worked in high schools for a couple of years. I actually worked with at-risk youth. And I had a few too many binders thrown at my head. And I thought, genetically, this doesn't feel right for me. So there's got to be another path within education, because that was always my passion. And a friend of mine got promoted. She was working at a training and consulting firm. And I was talking to her one day. She said, "Oh, they're looking to fill my position. Why don't you interview?" And it was for a training and consulting firm. And I got the job and I worked my way up. I started as the assistant to the vice president. And then she moved me into a business development role. Mike, she was one of those leaders that saw my potential. And I learned so much from her, because when I work with leaders now, I always say, you should see the potential in your staff and promote them. This leader promoted me out of her department into another department because she saw my potential. And I've never forgotten that. So she moved me into a business development role. I excelled there. Then I moved into a junior consultant role and senior consultant role. And sort of spent 10 years there learning the ropes, which was the best education. I did my master's degree in human resources, management and training while I was there. And then I thought, I had this vision, Mike, of starting my own business. I thought, before I do that, I need to go in-house. I got to leave consulting. So I worked in-house. I led teams. I built teams. I led high-performing teams. I led teams that struggled. I had people that reported to me that loved my leadership role, loved my leadership style. I had people that reported to me that didn't like my leadership style. And to be honest, it was from those people that I learned the most. And so after working in corporate for 15 years, I decided it's time to spread my wings and run my own business. And so I started Mosaic People Development in 2011, and I've been running my business ever since.
Wow. Impressive. Well, to tee up the podcast, so thank you for that. That informs myself and the audience more. And then I always try and, give the audience a level set. What does your company do? Who do they serve? How do you help your clients, Vanessa?
So I work with leaders specifically, every level of leaders, and I do it in 3 ways. So training, I really hone in, Mike, and teach the nuts and bolts of leadership. So what happens, as is many people get promoted into leadership positions without any training or education. And so they just have to figure it out themselves. And that's why so many leaders lack confidence, because they don't know how to lead. And it's normal not to know how to lead. It's like any new skill that you learn, It's you have to learn how to do it. Let's say you've never played golf before and you want to learn how to golf. Well, you would hire a golf coach and you would learn how to golf. Well, leadership is exactly like that. People get promoted without education. And so that's what I do. My training is an 8-module program. It's called Mastering Leadership, just like the name of my book. And it takes people through step by step by step by step of leadership. And so it's 8 months. And so I meet for a couple of hours. We talk about one part of leadership, and then they have a month to apply that and implement it. And then we come back and we debrief and we talk about what they learned and what worked and what didn't. And then we learn another piece. So it's like, I call it the drip learning approach. Try something, apply it, come back, debrief, learn a new piece, apply it. So that's the leadership program that I run. And then I do executive coaching at the more senior levels of leadership. And then I do team development as well. That's the third area. So when I've worked with many leaders over the years, they've said to me, oh, we did a session on trust. Can you come in and teach my team now how to build trust? Or in the leadership program, we did a session on the DISC profile. Can you come in and do that with my team now? So I do a lot of work with teams as well.
Yeah. Good. Very good. Well, listen, if we met in an elevator and I recognized you and I knew I was only going to get to talk to you for the elevator ride, what would be your elevator pitch? What is your brief philosophy of leadership?
So I would say, you know better, you do better. I really believe that leadership is like a sport. It's a learned skill. And so I find that many leaders are not effective because they're what I call unconscious leaders. They just don't know what they're doing that isn't working. And so if you can take those unconscious leaders and make them conscious leaders, so they really understand themselves, they know how to manage their team, they know how to lead their business, and they have the skills and tools to do that, they're going to be not only more effective, but more confident in their role.
Yeah, well said. Well, the timeless question, leaders born or made?
I would say made or enhanced. So the reason I say both is there are some people who have a natural leadership capability and sort of they have an innate sense of how to lead, but those leaders are enhanced by learning skills and tools. For example, how to give feedback. Most people don't know how to give feedback intuitively, but there's a structured way that you can give feedback. There's some leaders who are not intuitive, who don't find leadership intuitive at all. And so again, those leaders are definitely made. And I've seen the most, inept people at leadership become very strong leaders, but they have to want to do it. And I've seen people who are very mediocre leaders decide, I don't want to be a leader anymore. I'm opting out because it just wasn't the right fit for them. And I'm always okay with that. I encourage that. Very few people over the years have I worked with who've opted out of leadership, but I've had a few over the years, Mike, where honestly, the conversation coaching has been, do you actually like being a leader? Like, do you just want to go back to being an individual contributor? And sometimes people say, you know what, I do. Leadership's just not for me. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. Thank you for that. I agree entirely what you're saying. My son's wrestling coach had a saying. I always was struck by it. Like anything, there are some wrestlers born with natural ability. You can't coach that kid. He just got the balance and all that. But the coach was very accomplished on the national level. And he said, hard work beats talent when talent won't work hard. And in that sport, in any sports, and we've all seen leaders that just had that natural charisma. They were born with the toolkit. They had it, but they consciously or willfully or unintentionally never developed it. And so one of those people you're describing has apparently no leadership gift, from God. He was born and he's got to learn everything. If that person applies himself and puts the reps in, he or she, I feel, can become a world-class leader, not necessarily in a world-class organization, but a really good leader of the mailroom, the loading dock, an executive, a department head, a team leader, or whatever. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, leadership is a very complex sport. right?
Yeah.
It's multifaceted, and you're forever learning. And the thing is also that a lot of people don't know is, Mike, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book, The Leadership Pipeline, but in that book, the author talks about the levels or the passages of leadership. There's actually 6 passages of leadership, from leading yourself to leading other people for the first time, to leading managers, to leading a function, to leading an organization, right? An enterprise. So every level of leadership requires that you learn new skills, new behaviors, and that you spend your time on different things. So, for example, if you're brand new to leadership, if you're in passage 2, leading others for the first time, you're going to spend your time you have to learn how to spend your time not only on your own deliverables, but also on getting results through others for the first time in your career. When you move into passage 3, you're managing other managers. You have to get results through managers who get results through their people. And again, that's a different type of leadership. So you're forever learning in your journey as a leader.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, listen, on a couple of your podcasts, and I saw some LinkedIn posts, you mentioned repeatedly something that you refer to as the game changer, a new kind of leader for the new world of work. It's a heck of a phrase. And a couple of the sub-bullets that I've seen you address were the evolving workplace and its demands on leaders. And then you offer some practical tools for navigating some of these modern leadership challenges. So that's a long, drawn-out question. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
For sure. So I think that there's sort of demands on leaders on a couple levels. So one is sort of the macro level. Just the environment that we're working in has never been more divisive, as we talked about earlier, has never been more complex. There's constant change. We're dealing with AI and rapid technological changes. And so leaders are dealing with a lot of stress just on a macro level, but also on a micro level. There are some challenges in terms of lack of personal self-awareness. As I mentioned before, promotion without education. I find a lot of leaders have minimal strategic insight. So they're told they need to be strategic, but they don't even know what that means. And so it is a challenging environment. And so that's the new world of work that we live in. And so how do leaders overcome that complex environment that they're working in? So I really looked at over the years all of the issues that leaders encounter on a day-to-day basis. And I literally took Post-it notes, Mike, and I put them on my wall. And okay, they have a challenge with this, and they have a challenge with that, and they have a challenge with this. And I kind of organized them into 3 pillars of leadership success in this new world of work. And the 3 pillars are, for leaders to be successful today, you have to know yourself, you have to manage your team, and you have to lead your business. And so because leadership is so complex, in all of the work that I do with leaders, whether it's training or coaching or with their teams, we focus on developing skills and behaviors in those 3 areas: knowing yourself, managing your team, and leading your business.
Yeah, I love it. Well, another thing that I've heard you mention on several podcasts and in some of your LinkedIn and social media posts is the phrase mastering leadership, moving from doer to leader. And then you often go right into strategies for successfully navigating, transitioning into a leadership role, and then some tangible steps for leading with confidence and achieving team success as a leader. Would you care to embellish this?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I would hinge my conversation or the answer to that question on those 3 pillars of leadership success: knowing yourself, managing your team, and leading your business. So if we start with the know yourself pillar, Mike, the worst thing is an unconscious leader, right? And I find if leaders don't know how their behavior is impacting the people around them, it's so detrimental to engagement in the workplace, right? I was actually talking to a coaching client recently. Her name is Miriam, and Miriam is really ready to quit her job, Mike. And the reason is she's a super high performer. She's super engaging and open, and she's a great growth mindset, but her boss is a nightmare. He runs around the organization so focused on results, he doesn't focus. So he's like very result and task oriented and just sort of super into power and control. And he doesn't focus on his people or his team. He doesn't have that balance between task and relationship. And so she's burnt out and she's afraid. She comes into work every day afraid of how she's going to be treated. And that's no way to work. Nobody wants to work for a discourteous boss or a boss who's a micromanager. So because of his lack of self-awareness, she's going to be leaving. Yeah. And to be honest, Mike, I'm encouraging her to leave because, we know people leave managers, not organizations. So as a leader, you have to do the opposite. You have to be self-aware. And I always start with leaders knowing, what tone do you want to set? Like, come into work conscious of, okay, this is the tone I want to set. And the tone that you want to set is going to be different from the leader in another department because we're all unique. And so the first thing in moving from a doer to a leader is understanding what your unique leadership style is. So when I work with leaders, I always say to them, okay, what tone do you want to set? So someone may say, I want to set a tone, and I ask them to pick 3 words. So it might be, I want to set a tone that's high trust, filled with honesty, and super transparent. And another leader may say, I want to set a tone that is collaborative, that's focused on results, and that is focused on data and analysis. Again, 2 different leaders, 3 different words, not good or bad, right or wrong, just different. And so that's where you need to really start, is building that authentic leadership brand.
Yeah, I love it. Well, listen, your experience has enabled you to, well, first of all, you have worked for leaders. You've worked with so many leaders and observed even more. So I think I know you can give an informed answer on this. So picture a coin, 2-sided question. The first side of the coin is, are there any, and we're talking about the top slice of the top 10% you've ever worked with or observed or studied, Vanessa, are there any traits and habits that seem to be common to most of the very best leaders?
For sure. I would say growth mindset. I would say they invest in the development of their team. And I would also say they have strategic insight. So growth mindset is so important. I don't know if you know the work of Carol Dweck. She wrote the book.
Oh, yeah.
You know that book, of course. She wrote the book, Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. For anyone listening, if you haven't read the book, read it. It's a game changer. You've probably heard of the terms fixed and growth mindset. They came from Carol Dweck and her work. Even pop on YouTube and search growth mindset. So you have to have a growth mindset, which means nothing set in stone. Right? I believe that with hard work, I can develop any skill. And so when leadership is so complex and you constantly have to be learning new skills, that growth mindset is critical. You have to be able to coach and develop your team, right? So a lot of leaders know, I need to coach. I hear this a lot from leaders. They say, Vanessa, I know I need to coach. I don't know what that means. Like, how do we even do that? So that's what I teach them when I teach the nuts and bolts. And then that strategic insight is critical. So I'm working with the CEO of a fairly large organization. And I asked him recently, what is your strategy for the year? And how are you going to hold your team accountable? And he didn't know. He didn't know. He didn't know how to take the strategic plan and set goals for himself and roll it down to his team and have accountability meetings. And so that strategic insight is so critical for effective leaders.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I agree entirely. It's been my experience the same as yours. Let's flip the coin over. Least effective, ineffective, and maybe even bad leaders. I hate to use the term, but let's face it, they're out there. Do they also have some traits and habits in common?
Yeah, and I would say it's probably the opposite, right? It's having a fixed mindset. So believing everything's set in stone. And the fixed mindset also impacts leaders a lot in change management, because those leaders who are really effective know that you need to be able to change and have resilience. And I find a lot of the ineffective leaders really don't embrace change. They believe that, because they have a fixed mindset, certain things are set in stone, and so they aren't open to change. And in terms of these ineffective leaders, they don't invest in their people. They don't take time to coach. One of the best CEOs that I work with, she has her one-on-one meetings set in place. She never cancels. She's the CEO of a $500 million manufacturing business. Super busy. There's thousands and thousands of people in her company. She never cancels her one-on-ones with her team. Her team knows that they are a priority to her. The ineffective leaders, they're canceling their team meetings all the time. Their coaching meetings all the time. And I always say to them, what is the message that you're sending to your team when you cancel these meetings? Right? And so those effective leaders or ineffective leaders cancel meetings. They aren't focused on really prioritizing their team. And then also they're not strategic. They're not organized. They're not focused. I am surprised, how many leaders can't set a goal at every level of an organization, right? Like if I say to an executive, tell me what your 3 goals are for this year. Many say, I don't know. They don't know how to break down a goal. Right. And literally, like I teach them a process for breaking down your goals. And I'm constantly sharing RACI charts and Gantt charts with leaders. Right. So RACI is a great tool. When you talk about tools, Mike, I love RACI, which stands for responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. Right. It's not that hard to be strategic and organized. Get an Excel spreadsheet. On the left-hand side, write down all of your goals. On the top right, responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. And then have a meeting with your team and talk about what you're responsible for. Who's accountable? Accountability is the highest level. So if you're a senior person, the buck stops at you, right? When you're accountable. Responsible, who's on your team? Who on your team needs to roll out that goal? And then who do you need to consult with or inform to keep people in the loop?
Yeah, I love it. Well, the last 2 questions and your very informed, eloquent answers were aimed at the individual leader. And you've also been in a position that enabled you to observe, work with, study leadership teams. Mm-hmm. And I'll qualify this question. Everybody out there knows that, you could have a stellar sports team of franchise players. Doesn't mean they're going to win the championship. Doesn't even mean they're going to do well. Somehow those egos, all the talent in the world, the best roster the NBA or the NFL could produce, nothing. And then some team with a lack of those superstars just goes in and whips everybody. I find the same as with leadership. You could have the best world-class chief marketing officer, CIO, whatever, C-level everything. For some reason, and I'm going to ask you those reasons, in the second part of the question, talent does not, the roster does not make results. It doesn't always equate to the results that, are commensurate with the reputations and the resume. So anyway, I'm blathering on. Can you identify, or have you identified, any leadership, cultural, and operational attributes that are attributed to the very best leadership teams?
Sure, absolutely. So the best definition of organizational culture I've heard is how we do things around here. So first of all, as a leader, you have to be very conscious of the tone you're setting and your behavior and how it impacts people, because they're looking up to you, whether you want them to or not. They're going, oh, wait, how do we do things around here? Are we on time for meetings? Are we late? It was really funny, Mike. I facilitated an offsite for a client in Banff, Alberta, last year, a couple of months ago. And the session started at 8:30 a.m. So I arrived at breakfast. I was casually having a breakfast, getting ready to go down for 8:30. I wasn't facilitating to 9:30. And at about 8 o'clock, everybody started rushing. And I said, well, we're not starting for 30 minutes. Why is everybody rushing? And they said to me, oh, no. This leader, when she says 8:30, she means 8:15. So she's 15 minutes early for everything. So that's the culture on our team, right? Everything is early. I was like, oh my gosh, I better rush to get myself down there. So it's quite funny. So thank goodness I had a little tip off there, right? So culture is how we do things around here. So I'm going to recommend actually a couple books that people read. One is Five Dysfunctions of a Team, which is not new, but I think it's so good because the author, Patrick Lencioni, talks about the foundation of every high-performing team is just trust. And if you have trust, then you can have conflict, not interpersonal conflict, but conflict around ideas. If trust is there, people feel open and free to talk about ideas. When you can do that, he talks about commitment. You can make team commitments. Then you have team accountability and results. So I think that's a great book. The second book, again, marrying the theme of trust. All the high-performing teams that I work with have trust. So the other book is The Speed of Trust by Stephen M. R. Covey. And in this book, Covey breaks down trust into two different components. He looks at trust being both character and competence. And both have to be there in order to have high trust. So your character are things like how loyal you are, how respectful you are, how transparent you are. Your competence is not just results. It's, am I getting better? It's, am I practicing accountability? Am I having crucial conversations? And then there's three behaviors that are character and competence. There's listening, there's extending trust, and there's keeping your commitments. So to me, all of these high-performing teams have that foundation of trust.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love it. And again, the other side of the coin on this, the roster that's full of talent, or maybe not, but are there the same leadership, culture, and organizational habits and practices that seem to be associated in common with most of the mediocre or even underperforming teams?
Oh, for sure. I mean, most underperforming teams, I'll look at the leader and I'll say, what's not working for you? And so I go back to know yourself, managing your team and lead your business, and I'll do a self-assessment with them. And I'll say, okay, know yourself. How self-aware are you? Have you done a DISC profile? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? Are you leveraging them? Are you building a team to close some of your gaps, your leadership gaps? We all have gaps as leaders. That's normal. We're human. We can't do everything. Are you aware of them? And are you building a team to close your gaps? And a very interesting story around that. I once did a DISC profile session, which is a self-assessment that assesses your work style, with a finance department. And the CFO said to me, Vanessa, before you go into the session, I want you to keep an eye on this one woman on my team. And I said, what's the reason? He said, I'm thinking of firing her. She really just doesn't fit with our team. So I said, oh, well, I felt a little uncomfortable with that request, to be honest. But I said, okay, I'll keep an eye on her. So the DISC profile came out. Everybody on the team was a C. Finance department, so a C means conscientious, super analytical, detail-oriented, which is great for finance department. This woman was the opposite. She was an influencer, big picture thinker, strategic, high empathy. And after I did a session with the team, I said to the CFO, not only are you not going to fire her, you're going to promote her to management because she closes the gap that so many people in your team don't have. Right. And so that's just a great story about how really leaders, if you leverage someone else's strengths to close your gaps, it's going to be super effective for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing I've heard you talk about quite a bit on other podcasts is developing, effective, if not great, organizational cultures. I'd like you to share your wisdom and insights on that. How, people are sitting here watching or listening to you. It's like, great, Vanessa, I mean, everybody wants a great culture. I think I got a good one, or I'm just about to start one. I mean, how do they do it?
Yeah. So I would say it starts with trust, which we talked about before, open communication and a shared vision. So the open communication is super important. And I always say to the leaders that I work with, you as a leader don't need to have all the answers. You do need to have the questions. So if you want to build an open culture, ask your team. Ask your team. Say, what's missing? Actually, I like to start with what's working well. So here's three great questions. ask your team, what's working well right now in terms of organizational culture? Gather a list. What's not working well? Get their input, right? You may have some blind spots. And so to ask that question of what's not working well, you may get some really good insights. The third question is, what can we do to overcome what's not working well? So you're gaining insight, it may address your blind spots, and then you're working collaboratively with your team to build a desirable culture, because different organizations have different cultures, and different cultures are required to depending on the kind of organization that you run.
Love it. I love it. Well, I think this is a loaded question for someone like me or you because of what we do as a profession. But I want to, you're talking now to the younger ones, and to me, young is anybody under 50. I'm 68, so that's, it doesn't take much to qualify as a young person in Mike's world. But let's say the 40s and unders, maybe even the 35s and unders leaders. I think they look at, there's a lot of 27-year-olds, brand new baby. They've got a mortgage, student loans. They probably can't afford Mike as an executive coach, that, and it's like, well, the company won't pay for it, and that, or I'll do that when I'm older. You know what I mean? When I'm ready to become an executive, I'll do it when I'm 38 or 40, and as you know, I know you agree with this, the earlier the better to become a lifelong, student of leadership. So I want you to talk to the younger ones. What's your philosophy? What would you tell these people? Like, no, don't put it off. Role models, mentors, and coaches. First of all, how important you think they are. And then do you agree? The earlier, the better. And cast a wide net for all three. Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. The earlier, the better, for sure. When I work with people who are emerging leaders or who have been promoted into leadership for the first time, that's what my whole Mastering Leadership program is about. The nuts and bolts of leadership. I always say to young leaders, it's a sport, just like learning to play volleyball. There's techniques or any sport, right? There's techniques and there's strategies and there's tools. You have to learn the tools, right? And so if you can join, if you can't necessarily find an executive coach because it is, can be a little more costly, take some leadership training. Be part of a group training. That's the best way to learn. And I also think in terms of mentors and role models, what I suggest is find someone in your organization 2 steps ahead of you, right? Somebody who you admire. They don't have to have the same leadership style as you, but I'll say to them, okay, what are the areas in your leadership practice that you want to improve on? Let's say it's giving feedback. Then I'll say to them, who is that person in your firm or who is a leader that you've worked with over the years who gives feedback really well? And sit down with them, ask them for a coffee and say, I've seen you over the years give feedback really well. Can you share with me how you do that? Or you're such a good coach. Can I talk to you about your coaching practice? Can you tell me, how did you develop your skills as a coach? Who taught you to coach? So I always suggest look at somebody a level or 2 above you who's already honed that skill and just get curious with them.
I love that. I love that. Well, I want to throw an ad lib question. I just thought about this, and we talked a little bit about it before we hit record. So there's people out there that are experienced leaders listening to you, watching this video, and then there are people that are brand new, or 5 years or under, or literally brand new, or there's people wondering. I'm listening to this podcast, Mike, because I'm trying to determine whether or not I should actually volunteer to become a leader.
Sure.
And to anyone and it causes more people than I would like to see take a step back. I say, aside from rock solid character and integrity, which you have to have as a leader to earn that trust, I say the first requirement is kind of simple. You have to love people. Like, you have to actually enjoy working with people. And as a leader, they are going to bring you problems. some of which are, most of which are professional, every now and then some personal ones, you know? And if you're not willing to listen to at least somebody's professional problems, you're probably not going to be a very good leader. If you, in other words, if you think it's all, you know, fire and forget, he's a leader, I gave him his job, he's had training, he's good to go. If you think that's it, it's sadly mistaken. I'm sure you agree with that. So yeah, I'm clumsily stating the question here. What do you say? I mean, do you agree that you have to at least like people? Because we've all run into leaders. It's like, you know, let me put it a different way. I ran into a doctor one time, and he had a bad reputation, a brilliant surgeon, but a bad reputation for bedside manner and all that. And I met with him, and I quickly ascertained this guy hates patients. Like, he literally would just wanted to come in and say, okay, you need a knee operation. The nurse will schedule it. Bye. It's like, whoa, wait a minute now. Like, what's it going to be? You know, he didn't want to answer any of those questions. He had no use for the conversation. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'll give you a new knee joint, blah, blah, blah. And I've met leaders like that apparently I don't know why they're in a leadership role, but they apparently dislike or even hate dealing with people. Have you run into that? And what's your thoughts on this?
Oh, for sure. I mean, first of all, that doctor probably should have been an anesthetist who just puts people to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a good lesson in, like, find the right career for you, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Jokes aside, of course. I mean, when we do the DISC profile, we look at different leadership styles, and there's a continuum of task to relationship. Right. And so some people are just naturally high on the relationship side, and some people are naturally high on the task side. And I say to leaders who are high on the task side, you got to move to the middle. You don't need to be all the way over to that relationship side where relationships everything, but you need to at least move to the middle where you balance task and relationship. And that's that middle pillar of the 3 pillars of leadership success. Know yourself, manage your team, lead your business. Manage your team means you know how to coach, you know how to have coaching conversations. You don't need to really, love people, but to move that continuum over from task to relationship, you have to have one-on-ones with people. You can do that as someone who's super conscientious and structured. In fact, I love a good structured coaching meeting, right? Have an agenda. Talk about, what are your goals this week? What are you doing to move your goals forward? Because I find a lot of leaders who are more on the task-oriented side don't want to waste time networking or waste time talking about personal stuff. I'm like, who says you need to do that? Right? But what I do want you to do is have a coaching meeting, have an agenda, talk about goals, talk about how to move things forward. And then I actually suggest leaders like that start their agenda with, how are you? ? They have to remind themselves to connect with people on a personal level. Or how are you? How was your weekend? Like, add it to the agenda to remind yourself people matter, relationships matter, right? So you have to be able to coach. You have to be able to develop your people, move them from developing to fully developed. Again, there's a science to doing that, right? And then the third piece is how to create a high performing team. Again, you don't have to be high on the relationship side to develop a high performing team. You can be in the middle. That's that whole process of forming, storming, norming, and high performing, and knowing. There's checklists. I give leaders checklists of what to do in your forming stage, what to do in your storming stage, what to do in the norming. And, there's checklists associated. There's tasks that you can take. So even the most task-oriented leaders can move to the middle.
I love it. Well, listen, our time is run out. I cannot let you out of here, Vanessa, without asking you the fantasy question I ask everybody on the show. If you were able to bring back one leader from the past, spend a day with that person, who would you choose and why?
So I'm going to pick Muffy Davis. And she's not a leader from the past, but she's a leader I met in my past. So who is Muffy? I was in Mexico many years ago, and I saw this woman sitting in a ring in the pool playing volleyball. And when she got out of the pool, she was lifted by her husband into a wheelchair, and she had the strongest arm muscles. So I was like, this is someone I need to get to know. So I started chatting with her, and she's an Olympic athlete. When she was 16 years old, she was training for the Olympics, and she had a terrible accident, and she became paralyzed below the waist. And she was very depressed for many, many years. And eventually she became the most decorated Paralympic gold medalist in the United States history. So she is not only a gold medalist in a summer sport, which is cycling, but also in a winter sport, which is Paralympic skiing. And what I love about Muffy and her leadership is her courage, is her commitment, is the passion she brings to everything that she does, and how she's overcome so much adversity to excel with so much resilience. She's just somebody that I've met over the years that feeds my soul and really encourages me to overcome hard things. And leadership is not always easy. To be a leader, you've got to overcome hard things. And Muffy is my role model on resilience and overcoming hard things to really thrive.
It's a great choice, a great choice. Well, listen, thank you so much for this, Vanessa. And by the way, before we let you out of here, how can people find you? How can they find your book? How can they contact you?
Oh, absolutely. So my company is called Mosaic People Development, and my website is mosaicpd for peopledevelopment.com. You can also go to Your Leadership Resources. I write a blog every Friday, so I would recommend, if you want to learn a practical leadership skill every Friday, go onto my website and go into the blog section and sign up for that weekly. And you can also access Your Leadership Resources. We have a lot of different assessments and free leadership resources that I think will be really helpful for you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And again, thank you so much for this. I'm sure someone's going to reach out to you. This is going to be a good episode. It flowed from my perspective very well. And I would encourage you, don't be bashful. If you ever want to come back, I'd love it. And if you ever want to come back, I mean, as long as we're talking about leadership and leadership development, the audience is satisfied, so we got to feed that beast, so to speak. So if you have more topics, and I know we just scratched the surface of Vanessa, if you got something you're really impassioned about, you want to dedicate a whole episode to it, I'm your guy. This is your show. So you're always welcome here, Vanessa. And thank you so much, and wishing you a healthy and happy 2025.
Thank you, Mike, for such a lovely conversation. You too. Have a great year.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.